So I was sent a screener for a film called The Girl in the Trunk, and this follows the events of a girl who is kidnapped after running away from her wedding, and she is trapped in the trunk with a kidnapper having the only line of communication through a cell phone that she is given in the trunk. And the entirety of this film, like 98% of it, is shown in the trunk. And this is nothing new. We've seen plenty of films in very small confined spaces, whether it's Ryan Reynolds' Buried or a really cool film called Meander, a French film from a couple years ago that I personally was a huge fan of, where this girl's just in a tunnel the entire time. I love that film. And there's plenty of other films where I've seen this very specific thing with someone in a trunk for the majority of the runtime. Phone Booth, of course, is another one where we're mostly in a confined space. So the confined space thing is nothing new. And when this film started out, there was a lot of interesting camera work that was happening. And I thought, okay, we're at least in the hands of a competent director as far as like shot selection goes, because this is a harder film to shoot and to keep interesting and engaging because you're in such a confined area. You can't really use a lot. And so I was like, okay, at least that, because this is a low budget film. And I was fairly impressed with the camera work and the way that the film looked. And I was like, okay, we at least got that going. Then the dialogue started happening. Now, this movie is from Denmark, and the director is also from Denmark. And I can only assume that English is not a native language, right? Obviously, he's from Denmark. It's not native to him. But I'm saying, like, I don't know when he learned it, but I think there's a translation issue here. I think this kind of gets lost in translation. And I think people will look at this actress because she has the lion's share of the screen time. She takes up 99% of the screen time. And they're going to say, like, she's a bad actress. I don't think it's her fault, per se. Because I think her acting in this is fine. It's the dialogue. Now, could I place some blame on her or other people if they are native English speakers and they didn't speak up and say, this conversation just doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel correct. One of my big things as a film viewer, as somebody who writes screenplays myself, I'm a stickler for natural dialogue. That's the thing I'm always going to notice. And when I say natural, I mean natural in a movie sense, right? Because people don't talk like they do in film. But you can still make it feel real, even though people stumble over their words a lot. People don't come up with really poetic things on the spot, right? Like, so it's not realistic, but it feels realistic to the film world. This doesn't. This feels reality adjacent. When people talk like this, you know what it felt like more than anything? If you watch a dubbed film with fairly bad voice actors who are reading dialogue that was written as a translation from another language. That's what this felt like. But everyone in this is speaking English. Like, their mouths move along with the English. It isn't dubbed, but it feels dubbed. And because we are dealing with a lot of dialogue that's coming from off screen, these are, ADRs. These are voiceovers that are being recorded in a studio or something, and the performances that are being given feel so stale and forced. And in addition to that, the way people interact with each other, the way that she reacts to her situation and the conversation she has when she gives that 911 operator a call, the interaction between them, you can figure out immediately as somebody who's watched films. You know exactly what it is. You know exactly what's happening. You won't be surprised by it at all. But My wife just came home. Hello, honey.
Hi.
But it is one of the most forced and inorganic, like, interactions on film that I've ever watched. And I don't say that lightly. It is so unrealistic. The conversation between them, her responses are so forced. And it is that kind of dialogue that you would see in a first draft of a script and you'd say, oh boy, I need to rewrite this. Oh boy, does this sound terrible. There's no way anyone would ever talk like this. And they just rolled with that. And not only did they just roll with that, but then it sounds like dubbing for a foreign film with bad voice actors. And holy shit. This is a rough experience because the entirety of the film, a suspension of disbelief is not only required, it's asked way too much of you. So there's like, you know, people who are interacting with them on the outside. You know, somebody, you pull over and there's somebody on the outside and she's like, remain quiet or whatever. There's never enough motive given to why she's needing to be quiet. And the way people are reacting on the outside, the first guy that they interact or like, you know, we have a moment with who is there and you can 100% know the way this is going to go. But it's so bad. I genuinely couldn't believe it. I was sitting there like, you know, this film looks pretty good. I think the actress actually probably has talent. She seemed like she did. But when you're forced to give and to read this kind of dialogue, I don't think there's anything you could do with it. I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis could fucking, you know, make this dialogue work. So it's a dialogue issue, it's a writing issue across the board. And every moment of this film is so unbelievably unrealistic. It's actually kind of a sight to behold or to witness, to listen to, because you're just like, how? I genuinely, I'm not meaning to shit on this because it is lower budgeted. So don't take it that way. I don't mean it. I just, as someone who wants to eventually make my own film, I really am fascinated with how films like this get made and how no one on set speaks up and says, you know, this just feels fake as fuck. And I know what we're trying to do here is theatrical. I know that dialogue in film isn't naturally realistic because that would be boring, and it's supposed to be grandiose and it's supposed to be poetic and it's supposed to be, you know, all these things that dialogue in film are supposed to be. But you've got to meet your audience halfway. You have to make it believable enough within the universe, within the, you know, confines of the world that you've set up. And the world that we're in here is just our world. It's just the basic normal world. We're not dealing with superheroes. We're not dealing with any of those things. Not that this would work in any context. What I'm saying is that the kind of film that you set up, you have wiggle room within the universe. If you create a very bizarre tone, then your dialogue can feel different, right? Take Napoleon Dynamite, for instance. Nobody talks like that in real life. But because it's established early on and it meets the tone of the film, it's like, oh, this is a kind of a wacky world, right? This is kind of a reality adjacent world. But the dialogue and the reactions of people fit the universe that it's set within. And this is trying to be like a serious film with serious, you know, people, and you have this villain in the movie who is supposed to be menacing while also kind of playing it aloof, and I get the swing that they're going for with this guy, and I appreciate it like in theory, right? But it just does not work. And okay, I guess I'm done. This movie has a good amount of, I shouldn't say a good amount, but this movie has a few CGI moments with a scorpion and a snake and a helicopter. Those actually looked pretty good for the most part. The helicopter was a little rough, but I thought everything else, I think the snake might be mostly real. I couldn't really tell. But I did see that the director was also a visual effects guy, and that showed through here. So he did a pretty good job on that stuff. And for the lower budget, I'm always willing to suspend a little disbelief just because I know you're limited to a certain budget, and I can look past certain like CGI elements if they're not too horrible. And I thought these were fine. These totally were fine. If the movie was better, I would have accepted those 100%. So I do want to show my appreciation for the things that I thought were better than expected with a budget like this. But goddamn, man, I'm not going to keep beating the same drum here. It really was a fascinating watch. The interactions she has with her dad on the phone, stuff like that. Oh my God. You guys got to hear it. You got to hear it. I don't know. Maybe there's a trailer that has some of this dialogue in it so you can hear it, so you can hear what I'm talking about. The like voiceover, dubbing type acting. Oh boy. Jesus. I tried, but it's quick. It's within a few minutes, and this was painful to sit through. But I did watch the whole thing. I actually considered for a minute shutting this off and reviewing it without finishing it, but I don't do that. I never have, and I wasn't going to start with this one, but I really contemplated I was going to start this video like, this is the first time I've ever done this, but I can honestly tell you, this is not worth your time. You know, typically won't do that. I shouldn't say typically. I've never done that. But I actually considered it here. But I will admit I did about 30 to 40 minutes in, probably somewhere around 40 minutes in. This had the option of making the playback speed. I could change and adjust the playback speed. It had 1.25, 1.5, and 2. I tried all the different ones. 2 was too fast, and 1.5 was perfect. 1.25 wasn't enough. 1.5 was the sweet spot. It didn't help the dialogue at all. It made it actually even a little worse. But I couldn't take it anymore, and I needed to get through this film so that I could review it. But I gave it half the film, and it changed nothing speeding it up. It just got it done with maybe 15 minutes faster, and I'm very thankful for that. So, The Girl in the Trunk, dreadful film. And that's a shame. I always hate harping on these things, but fuck. I can't help but give the honest opinion. Anyway, all right. Let me know if you watch it.